Welcome to the Neutral Corner for the week of July 18th. I'm your host, Michael Montero. Let's get into the ring walk. So today's question comes from Damien Dogs, and he asks, now that Broner and Maidana have both lost since fighting each other, who wins a rematch, but only if it's a hot dog eating contest? Okay. You know what? Normally, I want to go with Adrian Broner, right? Because, they call him the problem, but his real problem, other than mastering the rhythm method or learning how to use a condom, is eating too much, right? And he's got experience, like being a fat ass runs in his family. I mean, you've seen his dad, right? But Marcos Maidana lately, he's kind of been looking like a sawed-off butter bean with a wig on. So at this point, I think it's an even matchup. It comes down to the type of hot dog, okay? Stay with me here. Broner's from Cincinnati. What are they known for in Cincinnati? Chili. So I think Broner would kill in a chili dog contest. But if it's those hot dogs that they sell at the vendors here in LA on the street with the bacon wrapped around it or something like that, I'd have to go with Maidana because he's pounded a few of those with a few beers after a weigh-in up in Oxnard with the Garcia crew. So I'm going 50-50 here. It depends on the type of hot dogs, but considering the family tradition in the Broner household of eating fat, fried pork products, and then considering the fact that Adrian's got 52 kids with 17 different women, and he's probably bought a lot of hot dogs, I'm gonna go with Adrian Broner, split decision, hot dog eating contest over Marcos Maidana. So last Saturday, it was a PBC on ESPN premiere as Keith one-time Thurman took on Luis Collazo in Tampa, Florida, right down the street basically from one-time's hometown of Clearwater, Florida. In the co-feature, Tony Harrison got upset by Willie Nelson. I want to start with that co-feature first because this is an example of things I've talked about before relating to Al Haymon building prospects. That's still a concern of mine for Errol Spence. We've seen several prospects now under the Al Haymon stable kind of just been fed cans. And when they stepped up to that championship level, not that Willie Nelson was championship level, but when they step up in competition, they've suffered, right? Take Gary Russell. He was fed nothing but tomato cans. He stepped up to that championship level against Lomachenko. And I think that they took Lomachenko lightly, and he got flat out dominated. You look at guys like Andre Berto, who even won titles, but they were kind of paper titles. When he stepped up to that higher echelon at the welterweight division, he had trouble. And then a guy like Harrison, he had a bunch of knockouts against stiffs, right? He'd only gone about 3 rounds average. I think in his 20 some odd fights, he might have had 21 fights coming in. He had fought only about 50 total rounds. He gets in there with Nelson. Harrison was winning the fight, but he wasn't dominating, I wouldn't say. He was having trouble in there, and he just got caught. The way he reacted when he got caught, it was, I believe, an overhand right on the top of the head. He didn't have the reflexes or the to hold on, right? He got hit, he kind of stiffened up, and then he just fell back into the ropes, and he was done. A fighter that's used to getting hit knows instinctively to hold or to move, to do something. He just froze up when he got hit. That shows me he's not used to taking punches. And that's what happens when you're fed cans. And he must be getting soft sparring. If you're not used to getting hit, you freeze up the first time it happens. And that's how he looked to me. But in the main event, one time to me looked a little tense. He looked like he had some nerves. And it's understandable considering in that co-feature there was just that big upset for Nelson, right? So, and then he's in front of his hometown fans. He started slow. He was looking to counter. This fight was really Collazo coming forward and Keith Thurman looking to set traps. And it worked. He did enough to win rounds, but he didn't set the world on fire. Now in the 5th round, Thurman reached with a right hand, missed. Collazo timed him and came with a left hook right to the liver. Not exactly to the liver, I think it was a little high, but it was a great shot, and you could tell it hurt Thurman. I think a lot of people are making a big deal of this. I don't think it's that big of a deal. People get punched, it's boxing. For me, I think it was a test for Thurman, and he passed the test. He took that body shot, he reacted well. I believe there was about a minute to go in that 5th round when he took it, and he was able to get away. Now, Collazo's faded. He's not the most powerful guy on earth. He's never been known as a killer, right? But he is a veteran, and he knew Thurman was hurt. And for Keith to not only get out of that round, but come out in the 6th and 7th round and dominate, cut Collazo, and get him out. He didn't get him out of there, but he made Collazo quit on the stool. It shows me that this guy's still developing, and there's still a lot of potential. But everyone talking about putting Thurman in there with Mayweather, I understand why Thurman's saying that. He's a young fighter. That's a young fighter's job to call out the top dog. But if I'm in Thurman's camp, if I'm Heyman and all Thurman's people, I don't put him in there with Mayweather. Not that I think that fight would happen anyway right now, but Thurman is progressing like he should. These are the steps that a young contender should take. So maybe put him in there with the Sean Porter next, right? Same banner, PBC. They've both been featured now a couple times on PBC. That's a great fight late this year. So later on that night here in Los Angeles, Mauricio Herrera took on Hank Lundy in a junior welterweight fight. And this was broadcast on HBO Latino, live from the LA Sports Arena, which is the site of the '84 Olympics. And it's the last boxing card, really the last sporting event to be held there. So it was a really historic affair. It was a lot of fun. We were ringside for this one. It was hot in that arena. There was no air conditioning. Other than that, it was a great night of boxing. But there were 2 fights before the main event. I want to talk about one of them, where Joseph Jojo Diaz Jr., Golden Boy Promotions' best prospect right now, he took on Rene Alvarado. And I want to mention this fight because this is an example of how you really build a prospect. Alvarado was put down early in this fight, but kept coming forward. He was rough, he was rugged, never stopped punching. He nailed Diaz several times throughout the fight, put him on the back foot. Diaz had to learn to come back from that, to make adjustments, and to grind out a tough fight down the stretch. It was a very close fight. One of the judges scored it way too wide. It was a ridiculous score. I can't remember, but it was something like 98-92 maybe. The other 2 judges had it right, but Diaz had to grind out a tough win. And that is a lesson that's going to help him later on in his progression. That's the way you build a prospect. But in the main event, Mauricio Herrera took on Hank Lundy, and this had the look on paper of being a good fight. But right from the get-go, it was kind of awkward. It was a bad style matchup. Lundy was leading with his head. He nailed Herrera early with some nasty headbutts. And I mean, I could hear some of the thuds ringside. And to me, Herrera looked visibly dazed from them. He needed a couple rounds to kind of get his wits back. And I thought Lundy clearly won those early rounds. But in the 3rd round, Herrera got cleared up. It was very easy to see from ringside. And he started working the body on Lundy and took over the fight from that point on, I think. He wasn't dominating, but he was doing the better work. And I thought he clearly won rounds 4 and 5. In the 5th round, about 2 minutes in, there was yet another headbutt and yet another cut on Herrera's face. It was just below the eyebrow, I believe, on the actual eyelid. And that's a bad place to be cut. It can affect the fighter's vision. At that point, referee Jack Reese asked the fight doctor to come over, check it out, and they immediately waved it off. There was a flap of skin hanging down. I mean, it just isn't worth it at that point, right? So they went to the scorecards, and 1 judge had it a draw, and 2 judges had it a split decision win, a technical decision win for Herrera, who finally gets a close decision to go his way, right? And for the record, both of these guys, Herrera and Lundy, they've been ripped off before. So it's hard not to kind of feel for Lundy, because a fight like this, you know, I think they should just make this a technical draw or a no contest. But they were in the 5th round, and at the 5th round on, you go to the scorecards. So It's not so bad though for Lundy. I think he saves face because he can go back and say, look, this fight could have went either way, and he's right, it could have. For Herrera, he wins, he finally gets that win. It wasn't a really great fight though. He earned a big fight down the road, but he's got some injuries that are gonna heal. I don't know if he's gonna fight again this year. So he's probably gonna be on the shelf till next spring. We'll probably see Lundy before we see Herrera again. This Saturday in El Paso, Texas, it's the return of Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. 3 months to the day after his beatdown loss to Andres Fonfara here in Los Angeles. This is a PBC card. Earlier on in the afternoon, though, Carl Frampton makes his PBC debut and his US debut. This is kind of an interesting card because the afternoon fight with Carl Frampton is on CBS, and then the night fight with Chavez is on Showtime. Interesting that PBC is doing it that way, but you notice I didn't mention either opponent's name. It's because it doesn't matter. Both of these are tomato cans. Both of these are guys that are pretty much showcase opponents for both of these fighters to look good against. Let's start with Frampton's opponent, Gonzalez. First of all, I'm not sure why Carl Frampton's fighting in El Paso, Texas. He's Irish. He's never fought in America. Texas isn't exactly an Irish hotbed here in the United States. Places like Boston, New York, that might be a better choice. Maybe Al Heyman's plan is to market Frampton to the Mexican-American fan base down there, kind of like K2 Promotions is doing the Triple G here in Los Angeles. I don't know. But Frampton's opponent has only fought once outside of Mexico. And it was actually on a Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. undercard when he fought Andy Lee. He's only fought 3 10-rounders. And of course, Frampton is one of the better fighters in all of boxing, especially in the lower weight classes. So this is a giant mismatch. If you're Frampton and this goes past 4 or 5 rounds, it's a moral loss. So you should expect a knockout early. As far as Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., you know, I mentioned it before. This is 3 months to the day from a really, really bad beatdown against a much bigger, stronger fighter. Is it too soon? Does this mean that he hasn't had a proper training camp? Is it a good thing? Maybe he went right to camp and stayed in shape and didn't blow up? I don't know. But Chavez, I think, has surprised a lot of us with his ability to win titles and win some good fights and actually win some exciting fights against decent opponents like Andy Lee and others. I think he exceeded our expectations, but he got to a certain level where talent and size could no longer carry him, right? When you got in there with the Sergio Martinez and Andres Fonfara and others, where that size advantage, that natural power that he has no longer could carry him. And the hype bubble's been burst. And he's lost that fan base. He once had one of the biggest fan bases in boxing, one of the biggest growing fan bases. It was him and Canelo, right? They were neck and neck at one point. And many thought that Chavez would win head-to-head because he was the bigger guy. But now I think it's clear that Chavez, this is the end of the road. He doesn't just have to win, he has to look great. He has to look in shape, motivated, come out from the first bell and destroy this guy. Chavez has to do something special here because that brand, basically his dad's name, that's worn off. And he's been given second chances, third chances, fourth chances. He's got to get it done here. He's got to look good doing it. If this goes past the 4th and 5th round, it's a moral loss and his career is over.